Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we cut through the noise, skip the usual headlines, and really get into the critical knowledge, the insights that actually matter. If you're tired of just scratching the surface and you want to understand the big shifts shaping our world, well, you've come to exactly the right place.
And today, we're diving deep into something pretty significant, a story that, frankly, the mainstream media often overlooks or gets fundamentally wrong. We're talking about Africa's economic rise. Quiet in some ways, but incredibly powerful. This isn't just about numbers going up. It's about a continent that might just redefine global power. Think geopolitics, massive economic shifts, the scramble for resources, and yeah, how all of this is going to impact you.
Right. And when we say deep dive, we really mean it. Our job here is to be your shortcut, to get you genuinely well-informed without you having to wade through everything. We've gone through a ton of material economic reports, academic stuff, geopolitical analyses, our own notes to boil it all down. You get the essence, the core insights fast. And look, for more real, uncensored news that goes beyond the headlines, seriously, hit subscribe on Trend Media. It's how you stay ahead. Okay, so let's kick things off by talking about this narrative, this story that seems stuck. For decades, right, the main image of Africa for much of the world has been, well, poverty, conflict, instability. It's just deeply lodged in people's minds. But under the surface, there's this huge economic surge happening, a real transformation. So the big question is, why? Why is this massive growth story so often ignored or twisted by the media most people rely on? Why the disconnect?
That's exactly it. That's the core paradox we have to tackle. The old story, like you said, it's stuck. Maybe it's simpler, maybe more convenient for some, but it just doesn't match the reality on the ground anymore. What's actually happening in Africa today is, well, it's radically different, and it's measurable. Africa's real story now, it's about jumping ahead with technology, not just catching up, but sometimes completely leapfrogging old ways of doing things. It's about trade networks expanding like crazy, especially within Africa. And critically, it's about a new generation of leaders. Dynamic, forward-looking leaders who are steering their countries with real agency. We're seeing a continent building its own future, challenging those old stereotypes head-on. It forces everyone to rethink what emerging market even means.
That's a powerful shift in perspective. But, for people who are still maybe a bit skeptical or just used to hearing about aid and crises, how do we back this up? What are the hard numbers? The data that shows this isn't just like a temporary blip, but a real fundamental change.
Okay, the numbers. They aren't just interesting. They're frankly overwhelming. They paint a really clear picture of strong, sustained growth. Get this. In the last decade, right, look at the world's top 10 fastest growing economies. 6 of them. 6 were in Africa.
6 out of 10. Wow.
Yeah. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
This isn't some fluke, not just one country hitting an oil boom. It shows a consistent, powerful trend, real economic momentum across the continent, not just in isolated pockets. It really makes you wonder, why wasn't this the headline for the last 10 years? Yeah. And what does it mean for investors who've maybe overlooked the continent based on old assumptions?
Can you give us some specifics? Which countries are really driving this? And maybe more importantly, how are they doing it? What's working on the ground?
Sure. Look at Nigeria, for example. It's not just the huge population. Their tech scene, especially in Lagos, it's exploded. Huge amounts of venture capital pouring in. You've got tech hubs creating companies like Flutterwave, Paystack. These are fintech unicorns, billion-dollar companies solving African problems, and now they're expanding globally.
Right, those names keep popping up.
Exactly. Then there's Ethiopia. They've become a real manufacturing hub, attracting big global companies in textiles, even cars. Why? Strategic location, massive infrastructure investment, focusing on these industrial parks.
Okay.
And Ghana? They've shown really solid growth too. Stable government, democratic transitions, and crucially, they're working hard to diversify away from just relying on cocoa and gold, pushing into services, adding value locally. The point is, this growth is widespread and diverse. It's not just one thing, not just one region. It's broad-based, it's resilient. And that suggests a fundamental shift that, frankly, the old economic models just didn't predict for Africa. It forces us to ask, how do we need to update our thinking about global development?
Okay, so the numbers are impressive. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about what's fueling this, beyond just the GDP figures. If the stats tell us what's happening, the innovation story tells us how. And often in ways that kind of defy the traditional playbook, right? What are the main engines here?
Yeah, the tech innovation angle is absolutely fundamental. It's not just a side thing, it's a core driver. It's reshaping society's economies. We're seeing this explosion of creativity, of entrepreneurship, especially in digital. It's letting countries skip whole stages of development. It's incredible, really.
Give us some examples. Where is this tech boom most visible? What does it look like in the real world?
Well, Lagos, Nigeria is probably the most famous example. People call it Africa's Silicon Valley, and honestly, it fits. The number and quality of tech startups coming out of there, it's staggering, attracting serious money. Think about Paystack, bought by Stripe for over $200 million, or Flutterwave, valued at $3 billion. These aren't small operations. They're enabling digital payments for millions across the continent.
Solving real problems.
Exactly. And beyond Lagos, the whole fintech revolution across Africa is maybe the most transformative part. Mobile banking especially. It's completely changed how millions access financial services. This is where that leapfrogging idea really hits home. Instead of building thousands of bank branches, which is slow and expensive, Africa just jumped. Millions went straight from cash to having sophisticated digital wallets on their phones, paying bills, getting small loans, managing money often without ever needing a physical bank. That's real leapfrogging, skipping the old tech entirely.
That is fascinating. But I wonder, are there downsides? Does this rapid digital jump create new problems, like digital divides between people or cybersecurity risks? Or is it all positive?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
The benefits are huge, yes, but the challenges are definitely real too.
Yeah.
Digital divides are a thing. Internet access, smartphone ownership, it's not equal everywhere, not yet. But governments and companies are pushing hard to close those gaps. Investing in infrastructure, trying to make devices more affordable. Cybersecurity is also a growing concern, naturally. As the digital economy expands, you need stronger protections. But overall, the trend is overwhelmingly positive, and it's spreading fast. Look at Kenya's M-Pesa.
The mobile money pioneer.
Right. It basically rewrote the rules for mobile payments globally.
Yeah.
It's not just sending cash, it's paying for groceries, school fees, utility bills, all from a basic phone sometimes. Billions in transactions. It's a global case study. Or look at Rwanda. They've gone all in on digital government, getting permits, paying taxes, accessing health records online. It cuts bureaucracy, makes things transparent, improves life for citizens. These aren't isolated examples. It shows this continent-wide drive to use tech for real societal benefit, not just for the elite.
So this digital momentum, it feels like a total game changer. Looking ahead, what does it mean for diversifying economies, making Africa more competitive globally? And how does it empower people, businesses on a deeper level than just convenience?
Oh, the implications are massive, huge. First, diversification. Tech helps create totally new industries, new jobs, new money streams that aren't tied to, say, the price of oil or cocoa.
Yeah.
That builds resilience.
Right, less reliance on commodities.
Exactly. Second, it massively lowers the barrier for entrepreneurs. Got a smartphone and an idea. You can suddenly reach customers, manage money, access markets like never before. It's democratizing opportunity. Think about a craft maker in a small village. Before, her market was just local. Now, with mobile payments, maybe a simple e-commerce site, she can sell across the country, maybe even internationally. No need for a shop, no need for a traditional bank account.
Wow, yeah.
That's not just convenience, it's fundamentally rewiring how the economy works from the bottom up. And for global competitiveness, this digital skill, this innovation culture, it creates a dynamic workforce, attracts more investment. It's not just about tech companies. It's about every sector getting smarter, more efficient with digital tools. It's a continent building its own digital future, and that's a powerful foundation for growth and global influence.
Okay, so this kind of growth, this innovation, it doesn't go unnoticed, right? Suddenly we're seeing this really intense interest from the big global players, China, the US, Europe. What's changed for them? Why the sudden focus on Africa now? What are they really after?
Yeah, the gloves are off, you could say. The motivations are pretty clear now and very strategic. It boils down to two main things: Africa's huge, largely untapped natural resources and its massive growing markets. For years, the talk was often about aid, but let's be honest, the strategic and economic calculations were always there. Now it's just out in the open. These powers are actively competing for influence, for access, and it's intense.
Can you break down China's role? Because they seem to have made a very early, very big, very long-term play here.
China's approach has been incredibly strategic, very pragmatic, and definitely long-term. You see it most clearly with their Belt and Road Initiative. They've poured hundreds of billions into African infrastructure. We're talking serious capital.
Like what kind of projects?
Think giant railways, like the one connecting Mombasa Port to Nairobi in Kenya. Billions of dollars, slashing freight times, totally changing Kenyan logistics. They built the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. It's ports, roads, railways across dozens of countries, all designed to make trade easier, get resources out, build connections. the long-term strategy. Secure critical resources for their own industries, open up huge new markets for Chinese products, and gain significant geopolitical influence across the continent. And they've been smart, focusing on what African nations said they need in infrastructure, often with fewer strings attached compared to traditional Western loans. That resonated.
That point about fewer strings attached from China is interesting, but doesn't that carry its own risks? People talk about potential debt traps. How are African countries handling that? And how do the US and Europe try to compete with that approach?
That's an absolute critical point. Yes, the Chinese approach offers speed and fewer upfront political conditions, but the worry about debt is real. Many African nations are very aware of this now and getting much smarter about negotiating terms.
So they're pushing back more.
They are. In the U.S., they've shifted their focus too. Less just aid, more emphasis on private investment, promoting transparency, sustainability, looking for partnerships in areas like energy and tech that align with their interests. Things like the Prosper Africa initiative aim to boost that two-way trade. Europe is driven by slightly different needs, maybe. Securing new trade partners, diversifying their supply chains away from other regions, especially after recent global shocks, and also trying to foster stability nearby to manage migration.
Makes sense.
They see Africa as essential, a source of resources, a partner. Both the U.S. and Europe are, you could argue, playing catch-up to China's early start. They see the strategic gap they left and are now trying hard to fill it.
Okay, this intense competition, all this money flowing in, it sounds a bit like history repeating itself, doesn't it? The scramble for Africa back in the colonial era, is this just round two with different players? Or is something fundamentally different this time?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it demands a careful answer. Yes, there are echoes of the past. The intense focus on resources, the power imbalance between global giants and smaller nations. Yeah. You can't ignore that history. And this is but there's a critical difference now. The increased agency, the savviness, the bargaining power of African nations and leaders themselves.
What does that African agency actually look like in practice? How does it change the game on the ground?
It means they're negotiating much better deals. They're more sophisticated, often more unified, and acutely aware of the value they hold. In the past, maybe a single country faced a massive corporation alone and got a raw deal. Now, it's different. They're demanding more processing happen in Africa, not just shipping raw ore, but creating jobs, building industries locally.
Value addition.
Exactly, value addition. They're demanding local hiring, technology transfer, real benefits for their people, and they're writing tougher environmental and social rules into contracts. This shift in power, it's changing the whole global economic picture.
Yeah.
African nations aren't just passive rule takers anymore. They're actively shaping the deals, playing the global powers off against each other sometimes to get better terms. It shows a growing confidence, better regional cooperation, and leaders really prioritizing long-term development. It's a huge change from the past.
Let's zone in on those resources then, because they're clearly a massive factor. What specific materials are we talking about, and why are they suddenly so critical for the whole world, especially with this green energy transition?
Right. This is where Africa's natural wealth becomes a linchpin for the global economy. The continent holds roughly 30% of the world's entire mineral reserves.
30%. That's huge.
It's monumental. And it includes minerals that are absolutely non-negotiable for modern tech, for electric cars, for the entire green energy shift. Just think, one country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, has something like 70% of the world's cobalt. You cannot make the batteries for smartphones or EVs without cobalt.
Okay, cobalt is key. What else? What are these other game-changing minerals, and why do they matter so much? What happens if access gets tight?
Well, beyond the traditional gold and diamonds, the really crucial ones now are things like cobalt, as we said, lithium, manganese, platinum group metals. Lithium is the other big one for EV batteries. Demand is just exploding as the world tries to ditch fossil fuels.
Platinum group metals, vital for catalytic converters in cars, but also increasingly for hydrogen fuel cells and other future tech. These aren't just valuable commodities, they are indispensable. Without a steady supply, forget about scaling up EVs fast enough. Forget about hitting climate goals. The tech industry stalls. The green transition stalls. So Africa's minerals aren't just resources. They're strategic assets of global importance. The race to secure them isn't just business. It's about national security, industrial power, tech leadership for the next century.
So, with stakes that high, who's winning this race? Who's getting the best access to these mining deals right now? Is China still way ahead?
China definitely got a head start, no question. Their early, massive infrastructure investments built relationships and paved the way literally for resource access, especially cobalt and lithium.
Okay.
They played the long game. But things are shifting. The US and Europe have woken up to the strategic necessity. They realize they can't afford to be dependent on a single rival for minerals that power their future industries. So they're actively trying to catch up, making deals, offering alternative partnership models. They know letting one country dominate these supply chains could be disastrous long-term. For jobs, for security, for everything. The competition is heating up fast.
And what about the African countries themselves in all this? Are they just caught in the middle, or are they finding ways to control their own destiny, maybe working together?
This is another really key part of the new dynamic. They're not just passive players. We're seeing a really strong trend of African countries forming alliances, regional blocs to negotiate collectively.
Strength in numbers.
Exactly. Strength in numbers. Think about it. Historically, one small nation versus a giant mining company. Tough negotiation. But a whole block of nations negotiating together, they can demand much better terms, higher royalties, stricter environmental rules, insisting on that local processing we talked about, keeping more jobs and value on the continent, securing fairer profit splits. It totally changes the power balance. It moves Africa from just being a source of raw stuff to being an active manager of its own wealth, setting the terms. It's a sign of real political and economic maturity.
Okay, let's connect these threads. The growth, the innovation, the resources, the agency. How does all this combine to actually change the global economy? Thinking about trade, supply chains, jobs. Where's the impact felt?
This leads us to probably the single most important underlying factor, demographics. Africa's population is set to double by 2050. Double, reaching over 2 billion people.
2 billion, that's just hard to grasp.
It is, and it's not just a number. It's a massive demographic dividend that will completely reshape global markets, workforces, consumer trends, everything.
So 2 billion people by 2050, that's more than just a big number. It feels like a demographic tidal wave. How does that kind of population boom change things practically? Consumption, labor.
Practically. It changes almost everything. First, think consumption. 2 billion people, with a rapidly growing middle class among them, means a colossal new consumer market. Unprecedented demand for goods, services, digital products, everything. A huge opportunity for businesses globally.
Right. A massive new customer base.
Exactly. Second, the workforce. You've got this huge, young, increasingly skilled population. This makes Africa incredibly attractive for companies looking to build factories, set up service centers. We're already seeing it happen. Companies moving production to Africa. Why? Big labor pool, often competitive wages, and you're right next door to that giant consumer market you want to sell to. Cuts down on shipping, simplifies logistics.
So less made in Asia, more made in Africa.
Increasingly, yes. It's not just about finding cheaper labor anymore. It's a strategic shift in where global production happens. Think about how Asia transformed manufacturing in the last few decades. Africa could be next, but with an even younger, faster-growing population base that impacts supply chains everywhere.
This really does sound like a fundamental shift in global power, not just economic power, but geopolitical influence too. So let me ask directly, is this going to fundamentally rearrange the global pecking order?
Yes. I think the evidence points overwhelmingly in that direction.
Yeah.
The rise of Africa's middle class alone, hundreds of millions moving out of poverty, is a geopolitical event. Their combined spending power, their demands as consumers, their influence on markets and trade rules, it's going to explode. And that inevitably translates into political clout on the world stage. African nations will demand, and they will get, a bigger say in how the world is run, in global institutions, in trade talks, everywhere.
You sound very sure definitively yes. For anyone listening who still thinks this might be decades away or just wishful thinking, what's the single most convincing reason you'd give that this is happening now, and how does it actually rebalance things?
The most convincing piece, it's the combination of factors hitting critical mass all at once. You've got a decade plus of solid growth, you've got the unstoppable demographic wave, and you've got African nations acting more strategically and collectively than ever before. Put those three together, and the trajectory is clear. It's not just potential anymore. How does it rebalance things? In practice, it means those traditional power centers, often Western-focused, have to make room. Institutions like the UN Security Council, the G7, the G20, Africa's collective weight will demand more representation, more influence.
A seat at the table.
More than a seat. A powerful voice. On climate change, trade, security, digital rules. Africa's perspective becomes essential, unavoidable. We're moving towards a truly multipolar world, and Africa's a key pole in that new configuration. It forces us to redraw those mental maps of where power lies. It's not just shifting east, it's shifting south too.
Okay, the picture is compelling. Africa's rise seems undeniable. But let's be realistic. No growth story is smooth. It would feel incomplete if we didn't talk about the roadblocks, the challenges that still exist. What are the biggest hurdles Africa faces on this journey?
You're absolutely right. We have to be candid about the challenges. They're very real. While the progress is amazing, major obstacles remain. I'd point to three big ones. Corruption is still a serious issue in some places, undermining trust and diverting funds. Infrastructure gaps, reliable power. Good roads, ports, internet access are still significant in many areas, and pockets of political instability or conflict still hinder development and scare off some investors. These aren't small problems. Corruption eats away at resources. Poor infrastructure raises business costs. Instability creates risk. They all need to be tackled head-on.
So, acknowledging those significant challenges, what's being done? Are we seeing real efforts to overcome them? Are there tangible signs of progress that should give people confidence?
Definitely. The story isn't just the problems. It's very much about the solutions and the progress being made. Anti-corruption efforts are widespread now. More political will, stronger laws, more independent watchdogs. Think of Nigeria's EFCC or Rwanda's zero-tolerance stance. They're making headway, creating a safer environment for investment. Infrastructure. There's a building boom across the continent. New roads, ports, power plants, fiber optic cables, funded domestically and through international partnerships. They know it's crucial, and they're investing massively. And stability. The trend lines are positive in many, many countries. More stable governments, more peaceful elections, stronger democratic roots. It creates predictability, which is exactly what investors look for. It's not perfect, challenges aren't all solved overnight, but the direction of travel is clear, and the commitment seems genuine in most places.
That's good context. But for an investor looking from the outside, those risks, corruption, instability, can still look pretty big compared to, say, Europe or North America. So, how do you weigh the risks versus the potential rewards in Africa right now? Is the higher potential return worth the perceived higher risk?
It's always a balance, right? Risk versus reward. But I'd argue the perception of risk in Africa is often outdated, while the potential reward is frequently underestimated. Yes, risks exist, like anywhere, but the rewards can be enormous, truly outsized, and we have proof now. Look at the early investors in African tech or renewable energy, people who got in 5-10 years ago. Many are seeing massive returns. Venture capital flowing into startups went from almost nothing to billions per year.
So the smart money sees it.
The smart money is already there. Companies like Jumia, the e-commerce platform, or big solar projects in places like Kenya or Morocco, they show what's possible. They demonstrate that the opportunities are real, they're profitable, and they span many sectors. While some headlines might still focus on problems, the reality on the ground for those doing business is often far more positive and lucrative.
So pulling this all together for our listeners, what does this mean for you? Why should someone care about Africa's rise beyond just, general interest? How does understanding this give you an edge?
Because understanding these deep shifts lets you see where the world is heading before it becomes obvious headline news. Whether you're an investor looking for the next big growth market, a business leader thinking about expansion, a policymaker, or honestly, just anyone wanting to be truly informed about global dynamics. Recognizing Africa's ascent is critical. It helps you spot opportunities others miss. It helps you understand future supply chains, future consumer trends, future geopolitical alignments. It's about seeing past the old stereotypes and understanding where the real action, the real innovation, the real power shifts are taking place. It puts you ahead of the curve.
This has been a fascinating deep dive, really laying out a transformative picture. So looking forward, what's the prediction? What's next for Africa in the coming decade or so?
Look, based on everything we've discussed, the data, the trends, the momentum, my honest assessment is that the next decade really could be Africa's time. If these growth rates hold, if the innovation continues, if integration deepens, Africa is genuinely positioned to become the world's next major economic engine. That's not just wishful thinking, it's a projection grounded in demographics, economics, and a clear shift in agency on the continent itself.
That's a powerful vision, and it feels grounded in the evidence you've laid out. For listeners who want to track this story, who want to see if this prediction holds true, what specific things should they watch for? What are the key indicators of this continued rise?
Okay, a few concrete things to monitor. First, watch trade deals, especially the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA. Its implementation is key. This aims to create the world's largest free trade zone by country count. Think 1.3 billion people, a $3.4 trillion market, reducing tariffs, making internal trade flow. It's potentially revolutionary.
A game changer for intra-African trade.
Huge. Second, keep an eye on the number of tech unicorns emerging. Those billion-dollar startups, we've seen some, but seeing that number grow steadily, that's a massive sign of investor confidence and innovation taking root. And third, watch for continued political reforms and improvements in governance. Stronger institutions, less corruption, smooth transitions of power, these build the foundation for sustainable growth and attract long-term investment.
It really feels like the narrative is shifting then, that the global headlines about Africa are bound to change, moving beyond those tired stereotypes to focus on innovation, growth, influence.
Exactly. The old story is obsolete. It's being replaced by reality, dynamism, incredible potential being realized, and growing geopolitical significance. We're moving from crisis narratives to stories of solutions, economic success, and a continent claiming its place. And that leaves us with a really provocative thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on. What if the world's economic center isn't just shifting east, as we've talked about for years, but it's also making a decisive, significant shift south? Think about what that means for global power, for innovation, for how we're all connected in the decades ahead. It fundamentally challenges our old maps of the world. And it's happening right now. So my final word is this: make a conscious effort. Challenge those old stereotypes you might still hold about Africa. Discard them. The continent's story is complex, it's dynamic, and it is changing faster than most people realize. Don't let outdated ideas blind you to one of the biggest transformations happening in the world today.
What an absolutely critical deep dive. Thank you for walking us through Africa's unseen ascent. And thank you for joining us. If you value this kind of real news, these deeper insights that get past the surface noise, please do subscribe, like this deep dive, share it. It really helps us get these important stories out there. And seriously, we want to hear from you. Drop your questions, your thoughts in the comments. We read and answer everything. This is meant to be a conversation.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay curious, keep digging deeper. This is The Deep Dive.